Have you ever wanted to 3D print your own video game character? In this video, we're going to be painting Kratos and Boy, orc versions of Kratos and Atreus from God of War Ragnarok. Now, I love the God of War series, particularly the last two games, God of War Ragnarok and God of War 2018. I love how we really get to explore characters and the growing relationships, particularly between Kratos and Atreus, the father and son duo. Now, unfortunately for me, I broke my ankle a few weeks back, but that meant I could play a lot of the new game uninterrupted. It was basically my full-time job, 44 hours in less than 6 days. And so when I saw Mr. Modular release Kratos and Boy, I knew I had to print them. This video isn't sponsored. If you're into orcs particularly, they have their own war game for them and they have their own dedicated miniatures for them, so check it out, link in the description below. Now with the printing, I loaded all the pieces into the slicer. They were all pre-supported, pretty straightforward, except for having to get to my garage where my printer is located. If you haven't been on crutches, they suck, and particularly balancing on one leg while you try level a build plate or scrape off models to put them into your wash and cure can be pretty tricky.
Yeah, that's one fine looking
Kratos.
Why doesn't mine look like that?
Now, unfortunately, I did have a fail on both of the bodies. Atreus's body was just kind of non-existent, while Kratos's had like the bottom bits of the supports had fallen off and the body kind of like squished. Now that's more likely on my end as I have a lift speed of 3 millimeters per second than the files itself. And then in my second attempt, I forgot to clean the vat from the previous fails, which just led to fails. But third time's the charm, and I just added one heavy support to Kratos' body and printed 2 sets of Atreus's just in case. So everything worked out. Please ignore my messy wash and cure station. I need to clean it and give it just a good wipe down. I then cleaned away any supports and laid out the pieces on the mat ready for assembly. Now this was pretty straightforward. Before I attached them to the base, I put a magnet at the bottom of the base. This will come in handy later. This works for my storage solution, but also my fancy high-tech painting handle. After the models were assembled, I put some texture paint on the bases just to add some variation with the kind of stony ground. I primed the models black and then gave them a heavy dry brush with grey. Then I gave a lighter dry brush with an off-white. And then the lightest of dry brushes with GW's horrible ceramite white.
Oh, that's nasty.
I thought I'd paint Atreus first to give myself some practice before I really go all out for the Kratos model. I base coated the model with contrast paints, and I really love how some of these browns come out, particularly on the leather and the straps, my favorite being snakebite leather. The plague bearer's flesh really needed to be mixed well, as you could see the separation in the pigments. Now I'm sorry if any of these shots are out of frame. If you can't tell, it is very hard to keep a miniature in focus, but also keep it in frame. This is like the bane of my existence. I really liked how the model was coming along, and I began highlighting the skin as that was a key focal point of the model. Now for the big guns, Kratos. He's got a lot of leather pads on him, and it's a little tricky as I didn't have a good maroon for this. I was trying to match the box art for the game, but then strayed away in a few areas with color. I worked my way adding different contrast paints onto the model, and even with a bit of planning, I found it difficult to work out what was going to be painted what. I thought I'd try something different with the skin, and after the initial base coat of the contrast paint, try some recess shading. I took dark oath flesh, which is a brown, and put it in each of the crevices. I've painted a lot of orc skin in the past and usually have used a dark green shade. However, I think this brown in the recesses gives the skin a more natural look, and I think will be something that I'll do going forward. There's something quite satisfying and freeing about only painting 1 or 2 models rather than a squad of 10. You can spend a bit more time on them individually, and I feel like they get the care that they deserve. I then layered up the skin and moved to the most difficult part, painting the eyes. I go for the classic red dot, however in one brush stroke your orcs can go from wog to wog. I did make a little mistake, but that was easy to tidy up with some green paint. Now that the base coats were done, it was time to do some layering. I focused on the areas that would catch a lot of the viewer's attention. This would be the blue shoulder pad and some of the leather parts. Now, I'm not too experienced with doing some freehand work, and if you saw how I painted the eyes, if that's anything to go off, you're in for a treat. Now, the Leviathan axe is pretty sick. It's similar to Thor's hammer when thrown, and it returns to Kratos. This is a very well-known weapon in the God of War universe, and I really wanted to do it justice. So to do that, I wanted to add some glowing runes. I tried to replicate this with some thin white lines, and then putting a thin down blue paint over the top. I'm happy with the result, but I know that there's a lot of improvement that can be made in this department. I also painted Kratos' famous red tattoos. I began with a thin down red contrast paint, hoping the shading in the skin would show through in the tattoo a little, and after a few layers, I went back over the green to tidy it up. Finally, the ground was just grey and then light grey and a light blue with a touch of white, just slowly progressing the way up to paint those stones. And I painted the rim black and he was done. Now it was time for a photo shoot. I struggle with miniature photography, and it's one of those things where it can be hit and miss as well. Your models might look really good when you look at them with your own eyes, but when you try to share them with your friends, when you take photos on your phone and stuff, they can just look just not that great. So what I did was I set up my phone on a tripod and then lowered the light setting in the phone. So you tap on the screen and then bring it down, and with some lights I quite heavily lit the model, so this kind of made the background go black but the model really stand out and be in focus. And so what do you think of Kratos, and boy, have you played God of War Ragnarok yet? If you'd like to see another hobby related video, you can click over here. Thank you for watching and happy hobbying.